The frost had crept into the barn overnight, and Xander Thorne found her huddled between hay bales when he came to feed his horses at first light, her lips blue and her eyes wild with fear. He stopped in his tracks, one hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he registered that this shivering figure posed no threat. She was young, maybe 20 or 21, with tangled dark hair that hung past her shoulders and a dress so torn and mud-stained it was impossible to tell what color it had originally been. Her feet were bare and bleeding, and she clutched her arms around herself in a futile attempt to ward off the bitter February cold that had settled over Alpine, Texas in the winter of 1882. "Easy now," Xander said softly, keeping his voice low and calm the way he would with a spooked horse. He was 26, tall and broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of strong coffee. "I am not going to hurt you." The woman did not speak, just watched him with those enormous frightened eyes as her whole body trembled. He could see she was on the verge of collapse, hypothermia likely already setting in despite the shelter of the barn. Without another word, he turned and strode quickly back toward his ranch house, returning moments later with the thickest wool blanket he owned. "Here," he said, approaching slowly and holding it out. When she did not reach for it, he carefully draped it around her shoulders, noting how she flinched at his nearness but did not pull away. "My name is Xander Thorne. This is my ranch about 5 miles outside Alpine. You are safe here." She pulled the blanket tighter, her fingers white-knuckled as they gripped the fabric. Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely form words, but she managed to whisper, "Thank you." "Can you stand?" Xander asked. "We need to get you inside where it is warm, get some hot food and coffee into you." She nodded, but when she tried to rise, her legs gave out. Xander caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how light she was, how fragile. Without asking permission, he lifted her into his arms, blanket and all, and carried her toward the house. She was too weak to protest, her head lolling against his chest as consciousness wavered. Inside, he settled her in the chair closest to the wood stove and added more logs to the fire, building it up until heat radiated through the small but well-kept main room. His home was simple, a testament to his bachelor existence. A table with 2 chairs, a worn sofa, a kitchen area with basic supplies, and a single bedroom off to the side. But it was clean and warm, and right now that was what mattered. He put coffee on to boil and heated up leftover stew from the night before, glancing over his shoulder frequently to make sure she had not fainted. The woman remained conscious, watching him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope that made his chest tighten. Whatever had happened to her, it had been bad. When the coffee was ready, he poured a cup and brought it to her along with a bowl of stew and a spoon. "Drink this first," he said. "Slow sips. Let it warm you from the inside." Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the cup, so he steadied it with his own hands, helping guide it to her lips. She took a sip, then another, her eyes closing briefly at the warmth. After a few minutes of this, some color began returning to her face and the violent shivering subsided to occasional tremors. "Can you tell me your name?" Xander asked gently, crouching down so they were at eye level. "Hannah," she whispered. "Hannah Dalton." "Well, Hannah Dalton, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up in my barn?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then, in a halting voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. "I ran away. From the stagecoach station at Fort Davis. I worked there for 3 months, cleaning and cooking. The owner, Mr. Gunderson, he seemed like a decent man when he hired me. But 2 weeks ago his nephew showed up from back east, started making advances, would not take no for an answer. 3 nights ago he cornered me in the storage room and I She broke off, her whole body tensing at the memory. Xander felt rage building in his chest but kept his expression neutral, encouraging her to continue. I fought him off, scratched his face badly. But I knew he would come back, and next time I might not be able to stop him. So I took what little money I had saved and some supplies and ran. I meant to hire a wagon to take me to El Paso, but when I got to Alpine yesterday, I found out Gunderson had sent word ahead. Said I was a thief, that I had stolen from him. The sheriff was looking for me. So you hid, Xander said. Hannah nodded. I waited until dark and started walking east, thinking I could make it to Van Horn eventually, but I got lost in the dark and it got so cold. I saw your barn and just wanted to rest for a few hours. I was going to leave before dawn, I swear. I did not mean to trespass. You are not trespassing, Xander said firmly, and you are not going anywhere until you are healthy and we figure out how to clear your name. But the sheriff is a reasonable man if you explain the situation properly, and if Gunderson did file a false report, that is a crime in itself. Xander stood and moved back to the stove, ladling more stew into a second bowl for himself. First things first, though, you need rest and food. The guest room is through that door. It is not much, but the bed is clean and there are extra blankets in the trunk at the foot. Hannah stared at him as though he had spoken in a foreign language. Why are you helping me? You do not know me. I could be lying. Xander met her gaze steadily. You could be, but I do not think you are. I have lived in West Texas long enough to know the difference between a liar and someone telling the truth. Besides, no woman deserves to freeze to death in a barn, whatever her circumstances. Fresh tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks, but she wiped them away quickly. I do not have money to pay you for your kindness. I am not asking for payment. Now eat that stew before it gets cold. For the next hour, Xander busied himself with ranch work while Hannah ate and slowly warmed up. He could see exhaustion pulling at her, the way her eyelids drooped and her head kept nodding forward. When she finally set down the empty bowl, he showed her to the small guest room, which had once belonged to his younger sister before she married and moved to San Antonio. Rest as long as you need, he told her. I will be working around the property, but I will not be far. You are safe here, Hannah. No one will hurt you while you are under my roof. She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes, and something shifted in his chest. Thank you, Xander. I will not forget this. After she closed the door, Xander stood in the main room for a long moment, processing everything that had just happened. He had not been expecting to find a half-frozen woman in his barn this morning, and now here he was, harboring someone the local sheriff was supposedly looking for. It could complicate things, but something in his gut told him he had made the right choice. He pulled on his heavy coat and headed back outside to tend to his horses and cattle. The ranch was not large by Texas standards, just 160 acres with about 50 head of cattle and a small remuda of horses he was training to sell. It was enough to make a modest living, and after years of working other men's ranches, he was proud to own this land free and clear. The sky was overcast, threatening more cold weather, and Xander worked quickly to make sure all the animals had food and water. His mind kept wandering back to Hannah, to the fear in her eyes and the way she had flinched at his touch. Whatever that man had done or tried to do, it had terrified her. The thought of anyone treating a woman that way made his blood boil. By the time he finished his morning chores, it was past noon. He returned to the house to find Hannah still asleep, so he made a simple lunch of beans and cornbread and left a plate warming on the stove for her. Then he saddled his best horse, a steady bay gelding named Copper, and rode into Alpine. The town was small but growing, serving as a supply hub for the surrounding ranches and the few mines scattered through the Davis Mountains. The main street boasted a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a church, and the sheriff's office. Xander tied Copper to the hitching post outside the ladder and went inside. Sheriff Ben Cartwright looked up from his desk, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Xander, have not seen you in a couple weeks. What brings you to town?" "I wanted to ask you about something," Xander said, removing his hat. "I heard there was word out about a woman who supposedly stole from the stagecoach station at Fort Davis. A Hannah Dalton." Cartwright's expression turned serious. "That is right. Got a telegram from Oscar Gunderson yesterday saying his employee ran off with $300 from his safe. Said she had been acting suspicious for weeks. Why do you ask? What if I told you there might be another side to that story?" The sheriff leaned back in his chair, studying Xander with shrewd eyes. "I would say I am listening." Xander chose his words carefully. "Suppose this woman did not steal anything. Suppose she ran because Gunderson's nephew assaulted her or tried to, and she feared for her safety. Would that change things?" "It would change things considerably," Cartwright said slowly. "But I would need proof. Gunderson is a respected businessman. His word carries weight. And if the woman was willing to testify to what happened, if there were marks on her that corroborated her story." Cartwright stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the quiet street. "Xander, if you know where this woman is, you need to tell me. Running from the law only makes a person look guilty." "I might know where she is," Xander said, "but I need your word that you will hear her out fairly. That you will not just throw her in a cell based on Gunderson's say-so." The sheriff turned back to face him. "You have known me for 5 years now. Have I ever struck you as the kind of man who does not listen to both sides?" Xander considered this, then nodded. "She is at my ranch. I found her this morning half frozen in my barn. She told me what happened, and I believe her." "Then bring her in tomorrow," Cartwright said. "I will hear what she has to say. If her story holds up, I will send a telegram to Fort Davis and do some investigating of my own. But she needs to come in voluntarily, Xander. Otherwise, this looks bad for both of you." "I will talk to her. Thank you, Ben." As Xander turned to leave, the sheriff called after him. "One more thing, be careful. If she is telling the truth and Gunderson's nephew is as bad as she says, he might come looking for her. Men like that do not take rejection well." Xander's jaw tightened. "Let him come. He will find I do not take kindly to men who hurt women." He rode back to the ranch with those words echoing in his mind, wondering if he had just invited trouble onto his doorstep. But when he walked into his house and saw Hannah sitting at the table, looking small and lost wrapped in his blanket, he knew he would face down any threat to keep her safe. She looked up as he entered, her face anxious. "Where did you go? I woke up and you were gone, and I thought maybe I went to see the sheriff," Xander said, hanging up his coat, to hear his side of things. Hannah went pale. "You told him I was here." "I did. But he is willing to listen to your story, Hannah. I trust him. He is a fair man. We will go into town tomorrow and you will tell him everything that happened. The truth has a way of coming to light. What if he does not believe me? What if Gunderson already convinced him I am a thief?" Xander pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Then we will figure out another way. But running and hiding is not the answer. It will only make you look guilty. Better to face this head-on." Hannah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying at the edge of the blanket. Finally she said, "Why are you doing this? You could get in trouble for helping me." "Maybe," Xander acknowledged, "but it is the right thing to do. My mother raised me to stand up for people who cannot stand up for themselves, and in my experience, the right thing is usually worth a little trouble." Something in her expression softened, and for the first time since he had found her, she almost smiled. "Your mother sounds like a good woman." "She was. She passed 5 years ago, but I try to live by what she taught me." I am sorry for your loss, Hannah said quietly. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the stove. Then Hannah said, I should tell you everything. If you are going to help me, you should know the whole story. You do not have to, I want to. She took a deep breath. I grew up in Missouri, on a farm outside Independence. My parents died of cholera when I was 16. I had an aunt in El Paso, so I used what little money I had to take the stage west, hoping to start a new life with her. But when I got to Fort Davis, I got word that she had died the month before. I was stranded with almost no money and no prospects. That is when Gunderson offered me the job. You have been on your own for 5 years, Xander asked, doing the math. Hannah nodded. I turned 21 last October. I have been working my whole life, supporting myself. I am not afraid of hard work, but I will not let any man force himself on me, no matter how desperate my situation. When Daniel Gunderson came at me that night, something just snapped. I knew I had to get away, even if it meant ending up with nothing again. The raw determination in her voice struck something deep in Xander. This was not a pampered woman looking for someone to save her. This was a survivor, someone who had faced loss and hardship and kept going. He found himself admiring her strength even as his heart ached for what she had endured. You did the right thing, he said firmly. No woman should have to tolerate that kind of treatment, and you are not going to end up with nothing. We will clear your name and then we will figure out your next steps. Why do you keep saying we? Hannah asked, her eyes searching his face. You do not owe me anything. Maybe not, but that does not mean I am going to turn my back on someone who needs help. He stood and moved to the stove, pouring them both coffee. Besides, I could use a hand around here. If you are looking for work once this is all settled, I would be happy to hire you. I need someone to help with the cooking and cleaning, maybe tend the garden in spring. It would not be much money at first, but room and board would be included. Hannah stared at him as though he had offered her the moon. You would trust me enough to let me stay here, work for you, I would, if you are interested. She looked down at her hands, and when she spoke her voice was thick with emotion. I do not know what to say. Yes. Yes, if you will have me, I would like that very much. Then it is settled. First we clear your name, then you come work for me. How does that sound? It sounds too good to be true, Hannah whispered, but I will take it. That night, Xander gave Hannah some of his sister's old clothes that she had left behind. Simple dresses and undergarments that fit reasonably well. Hannah bathed in the small washroom off the kitchen, while Xander discreetly stayed outside tending to evening chores. When he came back in, she was sitting by the fire mending the torn hem of one of the dresses, her dark hair still damp and hanging in waves down her back. She looked different, clean and rested. Less like a frightened animal and more like the strong woman he suspected she truly was. Pretty too, though he tried not to think about that. She was vulnerable and relying on him for protection. The last thing she needed was him developing inappropriate feelings. But as they ate dinner together and talked about inconsequential things, the weather, the ranch, his horses, Xander found himself captivated by her quick wit and intelligence. She asked thoughtful questions about his work and listened with genuine interest as he described the process of breaking and training horses. In turn, she told him about growing up on the farm in Missouri, about her father teaching her to ride and her mother showing her how to tend a garden and preserve food. I miss them every day, Hannah said softly, staring into her coffee cup. But I think they would be proud that I survived, that I did not give up even when things got hard. I am sure they would be, Xander said. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Hannah Dalton. She looked up at him, surprise and pleasure flickering across her face. You barely know me. I know enough. You ran through the night barefoot in freezing temperatures rather than submit to someone hurting you. You kept going even when you were lost and cold and afraid. That takes strength." Pink colored her cheeks, and she looked away, but Xander saw the small smile that tugged at her lips. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. He cleared his throat and stood abruptly, suddenly needing to put some distance between them. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Hannah nodded and rose as well. "Thank you, Xander, for everything. I will find a way to repay you someday." "You do not need to repay me. Just get some sleep." After she retired to the guest room, Xander lay awake on the sofa for a long time, staring at the ceiling and trying to ignore the strange feeling in his chest. It had been just over a year since his fiancée, Emily, had broken their engagement to marry a banker's son from Dallas, and he had convinced himself he was fine with his solitary existence. The ranch kept him busy, and he had friends in town. He did not need more than that. But having Hannah here, hearing her voice and her laughter, seeing her smile, it reminded him how lonely he had actually been. And that was dangerous territory. She was here seeking shelter, not romance. He needed to remember that. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Xander was up before sunrise, making breakfast and trying not to think about how domestic this all felt. When Hannah emerged from the guest room, she was wearing one of the nicer dresses, her hair braided neatly down her back. She looked nervous but determined. "Ready?" Xander asked. "As I will ever be." They rode into Alpine together, Hannah sitting behind him on copper since he only had one saddle. She held onto his waist, and he tried to ignore how right it felt to have her there, warm and solid against his back. The ride took about 40 minutes, and they spent most of it in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Sheriff Cartwright was waiting in his office when they arrived. He greeted Hannah kindly but professionally, gesturing for her to take a seat. Xander stood against the wall, arms crossed, while Hannah told her story. She did not leave anything out, describing in detail how Daniel Gunderson had started making inappropriate comments, how he had cornered her multiple times, and finally how he had attacked her in the storage room. "I fought him off," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I scratched his face badly. There will be marks, and I am willing to swear to all of this under oath." Cartwright had been taking notes throughout her statement. Now he set down his pencil and studied her carefully. "Did anyone else witness any of this behavior? Any of the other employees?" There was only one other employee, a man named Jack Porter who tended the horses, but he was usually outside or in the stables. "I do not think he saw anything." Hannah paused, then added, "But he might have heard Daniel's comments, and he might remember that I started avoiding going outside alone around the time Daniel arrived." "That is something," Cartwright said. He turned to Xander. "You said she had injuries when you found her." Her feet were badly torn up from running barefoot, cuts and bruises on her arms. She was suffering from exposure. Xander's voice was hard. "She damn near died out there." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Miss Dalton, I am going to send some telegrams today. One to Fort Davis, asking questions about Daniel Gunderson's character and whether anyone witnessed the attack or the aftermath. One to the U.S. Marshal's office, asking about Oscar Gunderson's reputation. If what you are saying is true, there should be some kind of proof." "What happens to me in the meantime?" Hannah asked, her voice small. "That depends. Xander, you still willing to vouch for her?" "Absolutely." "Then she can stay with you, but she does not leave town. If I get evidence that she is lying or if she tries to run, I will have no choice but to arrest her." "Understood," Hannah nodded quickly. "I understand. I will not run. I want my name cleared." As they left the sheriff's office, Hannah let out a long breath. That went better than I expected. Cartwright is a good man. If there is evidence to support your story, he will find it. Xander helped her back onto Copper. Now let us go home. The word home slipped out before he could stop it, and he felt Hannah's grip on his waist tighten slightly. Neither of them commented on it, but the word hung in the air between them all the way back to the ranch. Over the next 3 days, an odd sort of routine developed. Hannah proved herself to be an excellent cook and housekeeper, taking over those duties without being asked. She cleaned the entire house from top to bottom, organized Xander's chaotic kitchen, and made meals that were far better than anything he had managed on his own. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing stories about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Xander found himself looking forward to those conversations more than anything else in his day. Hannah had a sharp mind and was not afraid to voice her opinions, whether about politics, ranching, or life in general. She made him laugh with her dry observations about human nature, and she listened intently when he talked about his dreams of expanding the ranch, maybe breeding horses professionally. "You should do it," she said on the 3rd evening, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "You clearly have a gift with animals. I have watched you with the horses. They trust you." "It takes capital to start a breeding operation," Xander said. "Good stock is expensive and you need proper facilities. I have been saving, but it will be a few more years before I have enough." "Then in a few years you will do it. Some dreams are worth waiting for." He looked at her across the firelight, at the way the flames cast shadows across her face, and thought that some things were worth waiting for indeed. The attraction he had been trying to ignore was getting harder to fight. He caught himself watching her throughout the day, admiring the efficient way she moved through tasks, the sound of her humming while she worked, the rare bright smile she gave when something pleased her. But he kept his distance, reminding himself that she was vulnerable and dependent on him. Starting anything romantic would be taking advantage, no matter how much he wanted to reach out and touch her hand, to see if she felt this pull between them too. On the 4th day, Sheriff Cartwright rode out to the ranch. Xander saw him coming and felt his stomach clench with anxiety. Hannah came out of the house, wiping her hands on her apron, her face going pale. "Sheriff," Xander said as Cartwright dismounted. "Do you have news?" "I do." Cartwright's expression was grim. "I heard back from Fort Davis. Turns out Daniel Gunderson has a history. There was an incident in Kansas City 2 years ago involving a servant girl. The family paid her off to keep quiet. And Jack Porter, the stable hand, confirmed that he witnessed Daniel making inappropriate advances toward Miss Dalton on multiple occasions. He says he told Oscar Gunderson about it, but Gunderson dismissed his concerns. Relief flooded through Xander, and he saw Hannah's knees buckle. He moved quickly to support her, his arm going around her waist. "So she is cleared." "Of the theft charges, yes. There was no theft." Oscar Gunderson filed a false report, likely to protect his nephew and prevent the truth from coming out. Cartwright's expression darkened. "But there is more. Daniel Gunderson left Fort Davis 2 days ago. The word is he is looking for Miss Dalton. He told several people he was going to find the woman who scarred him and make her pay." Hannah's whole body went rigid. "He is coming here." "We do not know that for certain. He might not know where you are, but I wanted to warn you both to be careful." Cartwright looked at Xander. "You have weapons." "I do. Keep them close. And if you see any sign of him, you send for me immediately." "Understood." After the sheriff left, Hannah sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "I brought this to your door. I should leave, go somewhere else. I cannot put you in danger because of my problems." "You are not going anywhere," Xander said firmly. "This is not your fault, Hannah. You did nothing wrong, and I am not afraid of Daniel Gunderson. But he might come here, might hurt you because of me. Xander knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. It was the first time he had deliberately touched her beyond helping her mount the horse, and he felt a jolt at the contact. "Listen to me. You are under my protection. That means something. I am not going to let anyone hurt you, and I am not going to send you away. Do you understand?" She looked into his eyes, searching for something, and whatever she saw there made fresh tears spill down her cheeks, but she nodded. "I understand. Thank you, Xander." He wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that having her here had changed something fundamental in his life, that the thought of her leaving made his chest ache. But the words stuck in his throat, so he just squeezed her hands once and stood. That night, Xander barely slept, keeping his rifle close and listening for any unusual sounds. Every creak of the house settling, every gust of wind, had him on edge. Around 2 in the morning, he finally dozed off, only to be jolted awake an hour later by the sound of breaking glass. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. A second later, he heard Hannah scream from the guest room. Xander ran toward the sound, but before he could reach the door, it burst open and a man stumbled out, dragging Hannah with him. Even in the dim light, Xander could see the fresh scars on his face, long scratches that ran from temple to jaw. Daniel Gunderson. "Let her go," Xander said, his voice deadly calm as he raised the rifle. Daniel laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. He had a knife pressed to Hannah's throat, and Xander could see a thin line of blood where the blade pressed against her skin. "I do not think so, Cowboy. This little wildcat ruined my face. She's going to pay for that." "The sheriff knows you are here," Xander lied. "He is probably on his way right now. You let her go and ride out of here. Maybe you can get away before he arrives." "I am not stupid enough to fall for that." Daniel's grip tightened on Hannah, making her whimper. "Now you are going to put that rifle down nice and slow, or I am going to cut her throat right here in front of you." Xander's mind raced. He was a decent shot, but in the dim light with Hannah so close to the target, the risk was too great. But if he put down the rifle, Daniel would have all the power. He needed a distraction, something to make the man loosen his grip even for a second. As if reading his thoughts, Hannah suddenly went limp, her full weight dropping in Daniel's arms. Startled, he loosened his grip on the knife for just an instant, and that was all Xander needed. He lunged forward, using the butt of the rifle to strike Daniel hard across the temple. The man went down like a felled tree, the knife clattering away across the floor. Hannah scrambled away from Daniel's unconscious form, her hand going to her throat. Xander was at her side in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt? Did he cut you badly?" "No, I am all right, just a scratch." She was shaking violently, and Xander held her tighter, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. "You are safe now. I have got you." They stayed like that for a long moment, her face pressed against his chest and his arms wrapped protectively around her. Xander could feel her heartbeat gradually slowing, her breathing becoming less ragged. And he realized with sudden clarity that this was not just about protection anymore. This was not just about doing the right thing. He was falling in love with her. The thought should have terrified him, but instead it felt like something clicking into place, a puzzle piece he had not known was missing. Of course he was falling for her. How could he not? She was brave and strong and kind, and being near her made everything in his life feel more vivid, more real. But now was not the time for such revelations. He gently set Hannah back, checking the cut on her neck. It was shallow, barely more than a scratch, as she had said. "We need to secure him and get the sheriff." "How did he find me?" Hannah asked, her voice shaky. "I do not know, but he is not going to hurt you again, that I can promise." They tied Daniel up with rope from the barn, and Xander sent Hannah to the neighbor's ranch 2 miles south to fetch Sheriff Cartwright, while he stood guard. The sun was just rising when Cartwright arrived with 2 deputies. They hauled a now conscious Daniel Gunderson into the back of a wagon, and Cartwright took everyone's statements. "He is going to stand trial for assault and attempted murder," the sheriff said. "With Miss Dalton's testimony and what I already know about his past, he will be locked up for a long time." "What about his uncle?" Hannah asked. "Will he face charges for filing a false report?" "I will handle Oscar Gunderson. He's going to answer for what he did, make no mistake." Cartwright tipped his hat to them both. "You two did good. Most folks would not have handled this as well." After the sheriff left with his prisoner, Xander and Hannah stood in the yard, exhaustion finally catching up with both of them. The adrenaline that had kept them going was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. "I cannot believe it is over," Hannah said quietly. "I kept waiting for something else to go wrong. It is over. You are safe now, your name is cleared, and Daniel Gunderson will not be hurting anyone else." She turned to face him, and there was something in her expression that made his breath catch. "You saved my life. Again, how many times am I going to owe you? You do not owe me anything, Hannah." He stopped, not sure how to put his feelings into words. "You what?" she prompted softly. He took a breath, deciding to risk it. "I care about you. More than I should, probably. More than is smart given the circumstances, but I cannot help it. Having you here these past days, getting to know you, it has meant everything to me." Hannah's eyes widened, but she did not pull away. "Xander, you do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. And if you want to leave, find work elsewhere, I will understand. I do not want you to feel obligated to stay because I helped you." "Stop talking," Hannah said, and then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was tentative at first, soft and questioning, but when Xander responded, cupping her face gently with his hands, it deepened into something that spoke of all the fear and relief and longing they had both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Hannah smiled up at him. "I do not want to leave," she said. "I want to stay here with you if you will have me, not as your employee, as your partner, your equal." "Yes," Xander said without hesitation. "Yes to all of that." She kissed him again, and this time it was joyful, free from the shadows that had been hanging over them. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was fully up, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "We should get some rest," Xander said, though he was reluctant to let her go. "Together," Hannah said firmly. "I do not want to sleep alone anymore." He understood what she was not saying, that the fear and nightmares would be easier to face with someone beside her. "Together," he agreed. They spent the rest of that day recovering, dozing on the sofa in each other's arms, talking quietly about everything and nothing. It felt natural, right, as though they had been doing this for years rather than days. And when night fell again, Xander gave Hannah his bedroom while he took the sofa, even though every part of him wanted to pull her close and never let go. They had time now. Time to do this right, to build something real and lasting without the pressure of danger hanging over them. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened and grew. Xander taught Hannah to ride properly, and she proved to be a natural horsewoman, fearless and competent. In turn, she transformed his bare-bones ranch house into a real home, adding small touches that made it welcoming: curtains for the windows, flowers in jars, the scent of fresh bread filling the air. They worked side by side during the day, Hannah helping with whatever tasks needed doing, and in the evenings they would sit together and talk about their dreams for the future. Xander spoke of his plans to expand the ranch, and Hannah shared her desire to have a real garden, maybe even sell vegetables and preserves in town. "We could do all of it," Xander said one evening, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset from the porch. Build this place up together, make it something special." "I would like that," Hannah said softly. "I have been alone for so long I forgot what it was like to have a partner, to have someone who sees me as an equal." "You are more than my equal," Xander said. "You are the strongest person I know." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. 2 months after Daniel Gunderson's attack, word came from Fort Davis that he had been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Oscar Gunderson had been fined heavily for filing false charges and lost his contract to run the stagecoach station. Justice, it seemed, had been served. That same week, Xander asked Hannah to marry him. He did it without fanfare on a normal evening after dinner. They were washing dishes together, falling into the comfortable rhythm they had developed, when he suddenly set down the plate he was drying and turned to her. "Marry me," he said. Hannah nearly dropped the pot she was scrubbing. "What? Marry me, Hannah?" "I know it has not been very long, and if you want to wait, we can wait, but I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building a future together. I want this to be our home, our ranch. I want everything with you." She stared at him, soap suds dripping from her hands. Then a smile broke across her face, so bright and joyful it took his breath away. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, not caring that she was soaking his shirt with dishwater. She laughed and kissed him, and Xander thought he had never been happier than in this moment, in his simple kitchen with this extraordinary woman in his arms. They were married a month later in the small church in Alpine, with Sheriff Cartwright and half the town in attendance. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and Xander wore his best suit, his hair finely trimmed and neat. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed her with all the love and promise he had in his heart. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. They expanded the ranch slowly but steadily, adding more cattle and building a proper stable for the horses Xander was training. Hannah's garden flourished, and she began selling her preserves in town, developing a reputation for quality that brought customers from as far away as Fort Davis. They faced the normal challenges of ranch life: harsh winters, dry summers, the occasional bout of sickness among the animals. But they faced it all together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing season. In the spring of 1884, Hannah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Henry after her father. Xander held the tiny baby in his arms and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Hannah, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him from the bed. "He is perfect," Xander whispered. "He is ours," Hannah corrected softly. "That makes him perfect." 2 years later, their daughter Clara was born, a fierce little thing with her mother's dark hair and her father's brown eyes. Xander joked that she was going to be a handful, and Hannah laughed and said she would fit right in with the family. As the children grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Xander's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout West Texas, and he began to make good money breeding and selling quality stock. Hannah's preserves business expanded as well, and she hired 2 women from town to help with production. They added on to the house, building a proper second floor with bedrooms for the children and a larger kitchen for Hannah's work. The ranch that had once been a modest operation became one of the most successful in the area, known for its quality horses and the couple who had built it from nothing. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed, Xander and Hannah would sit on the porch and remember that cold February dawn when he had found her shivering in his barn. It seemed like a lifetime ago, though the emotions were still fresh: the fear, the uncertainty, the gradual dawning of love. "I was so scared that morning," Hannah said one such evening, her head resting on Xander's shoulder. "I thought I was going to die out there in the cold. Instead, you found your way to exactly where you needed to be, Xander said, kissing the top of her head. No, I found my way home. To you. In 1890, they celebrated 8 years of marriage with a party that brought together friends and neighbors from all over the county. Henry was 6 now, already showing signs of inheriting his father's way with horses. Clara was 4, fearless and full of mischief. Hannah was pregnant again, though they had not told anyone yet, wanting to savor the secret between them a little longer. As Xander looked around at the life they had built, the thriving ranch, the beautiful children, the friends who had become family, and most of all the woman standing beside him who had transformed his entire world, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Sometimes he thought about how different his life would have been if he had not gone to the barn at that particular moment, that cold February morning. If he had been delayed by even a few minutes, he might have missed her entirely. She might have frozen to death, or been caught by someone less kind, and he would never have known the love that had come to define his entire existence. But he had been there. He had wrapped her in a blanket and listened to her story. He had chosen to help when it would have been easier to turn away, and that choice had led to everything good in his life. "What are you thinking about?" Hannah asked, slipping her hand into his. "How lucky I am," Xander said simply. "How one morning changed everything." "For both of us," Hannah said, squeezing his hand. "You gave me my life back, Xander. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never trust anyone again. You gave me a home and a family and a future. Everything I am now, everything we have built, it all started because you showed me kindness when you had no reason to." "I had every reason to," Xander said. "You just did not know it yet." She smiled at him, that brilliant smile that still made his heart skip a beat even after all these years. "I love you, Xander Thorne." "I love you too, Hannah Thorne. Always have, always will." As the party continued around them, they stood together on the porch of the house they had built, watching their children play in the yard, and thought about the life they were still creating together. There would be challenges ahead, of course. There always were. But they would face them the way they faced everything, as partners, as equals, as two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build something beautiful. Their third child, a daughter they named Rose, was born that winter. She had Hannah's fierce spirit and Xander's patient determination, and from the moment she arrived, she completed their family in a way that felt absolutely right. As the years passed, the Thorne Ranch became a landmark in West Texas, known not just for its quality stock, but for the couple who ran it with integrity and compassion. They were the people others turned to in times of trouble, offering help and shelter the way Xander had once offered it to a frightened woman in his barn. They hired workers fairly and treated them well, earning loyalty and respect throughout the community. Hannah's charitable work extended to helping other women in difficult situations, offering employment and safe harbor to those who needed it. More than once, a desperate woman showed up at their door, and Hannah always welcomed them in, remembering her own desperation that cold February night. Henry grew into a fine horseman, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Xander's hair turned gray. Clara developed a head for business, managing the financial side of both the ranch and Hannah's preserves enterprise. And Rose, the baby of the family, proved to have her mother's gift in the kitchen, creating new recipes that expanded the business even further. In 1900, on a warm spring evening, Xander and Hannah celebrated their 18-year anniversary by taking a ride out to the old barn where they had first met. It had been rebuilt and expanded over the years, but the basic structure was the same. They stood in the spot where he had found her, and Hannah wrapped her arms around her husband. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not stumbled into your barn that night?" she asked. "No," Xander said firmly, "because I do not believe in coincidence anymore. I think you were meant to be here. We were meant to find each other." "That is not very practical coming from a pragmatic rancher," Hannah teased. "Maybe not, but it is true. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah. Everything good in my life stems from the moment I decided to help you instead of turning away. And you are everything to me," Hannah said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "My hero, my partner, my love." They had years yet ahead of them, years filled with the joys and sorrows that come with any long life. They would see their children married and settled, would welcome grandchildren who would run through the fields of the ranch and hear stories about their grandparents' early days. They would face loss and celebration, hardship and triumph, always together, always committed to the life they had built from that first moment of kindness. But in that moment, standing in the barn where their story had begun, they were simply Xander and Hannah, a cowboy who had found a shivering woman at dawn and chosen compassion, and a woman who had been brave enough to accept help and eventually to open her heart to love. The moon rose over the Texas hills, painting the landscape in silver light, and inside the barn, two people who had saved each other stood wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for every moment that had led them here. Years later, when they were old and gray, sitting on the porch and watching their grandchildren play, Hannah would sometimes turn to Xander and say, "Thank you for wrapping me in that blanket and listening to my story." And Xander would smile and reply, "Thank you for being brave enough to survive until I found you." It was their private ritual, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. And every time they said it, they meant it with their whole hearts, because some stories do not end. They just keep growing, branching out into new chapters, new generations, new possibilities. The love that began in a freezing barn at dawn had grown into a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and two people who chose each other again and again, every single day. On a clear autumn morning in 1915, Xander Thorne passed away peacefully in his sleep, his hand clasped in Hannah's, surrounded by children and grandchildren. He was 69 years old and had lived a life richer than he had ever imagined possible. Hannah held him and whispered her love, and though her heart was broken, she was grateful for every moment they had shared. She lived 3 more years, keeping the ranch running with the help of her children, telling stories about their father to anyone who would listen. She spoke of his kindness, his strength, his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. She made sure everyone knew that Xander Thorne had been the finest man she had ever known, and that her life had been blessed beyond measure because he had chosen to help a desperate woman one cold February morning. When Hannah passed in 1918, at the age of 77, she was buried beside Xander on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Her children commissioned a simple stone marker that read, "Hannah Dalton Thorne, 1861–1918, beloved wife, mother, and friend, she found home in his kindness." And beside it, Xander's marker read, "Xander Thorne, 1856–1915, beloved husband, father, and friend. He found love when he chose compassion." The Thorne Ranch continued through subsequent generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But they all knew where it had started, with a cowboy who found a shivering woman in his barn at dawn, wrapped her in a blanket, and listened to her story. That simple act of kindness had rippled out through time, creating a legacy of love, compassion, and commitment that would endure for generations to come. And sometimes, on cold February mornings when the frost crept across the fields, People said you could feel the presence of Xander and Hannah walking together through the ranch they had loved, their spirits intertwined as completely in death as their lives had been in life. It was just a story, of course, a romantic notion, but it was a story people liked to tell, a reminder that love could begin in the most unexpected ways and grow into something eternal. The barn still stood, though it had been rebuilt and renovated countless times over the decades. But the family always maintained it, knowing it was sacred ground, the place where their family story truly began. And whenever a Thorne child asked about their great-great-grandparents, they were brought to that barn and told the story of a cold February morning in 1882, when a cowboy's compassion and a woman's courage created a love that would echo through the ages. That was the legacy of Xander and Hannah Thorne, not just the prosperous ranch or the successful businesses, but the proof that choosing kindness, choosing to listen, choosing to help someone in need could change the entire trajectory of a life, or in their case, many lives. Their great-grandchildren would go on to carry those values forward, helping others in their communities, offering shelter to those in need, and always remembering the story of how their family began. The tale of Hannah shivering in the barn became the foundation myth of the Thorne family, told and retold at every gathering, a reminder of who they were and what they stood for. In the end, it was not just a story about two people falling in love. It was a story about the choices we make in critical moments, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable, and the compassion required to truly help someone in need. It was about two people who found each other when they both needed it most and built something beautiful from that foundation of mutual respect and love. The sun set over the Thorne Ranch, as it had for over a century, painting the sky in colors of gold and crimson. The land that Xander had worked so hard to build, and that Hannah had helped transform into a true home, continued to thrive, a living testament to what they had created together. And though they were gone, their love story remained, passed down through generations, inspiring others to choose kindness, to listen to those in need, and to believe that love could bloom in even the coldest dawn. Because that is what Hannah and Xander Thorne had proven, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is wrap someone in a blanket and listen to their story. You never know where that simple act of compassion might lead. For them, it led to a lifetime of love, a family that would span generations, and a legacy that would never be forgotten. The story of the cowboy who found her shivering in his barn at dawn would be told for years to come, a reminder that love often begins not with grand gestures but with simple kindness, and that the best stories are the ones where two people choose each other, again and again, through every challenge and every joy, until the very end.